the time frame to information sharing narrative for a national crime coordinating centre. So just to give people a bit of background, as someone who has spent many years on the front line as a fraud squad detective, I sort of come to this conversation from a practitioner's perspective. Now, things have moved on from the day when I was a detective. It's now moved into cybercrime. It's gone into the world of AI. We've evolved in using AI when it comes to investigation. So how does all that fit in? So I'm sort of one grounded in the realities of investigating and disrupting organized crime. So my aim today is to hopefully offer an insight into the world that may be less familiar to some of you, but which is of growing significance to the safety, resilience, and integrity of our society, and indeed, dare I say it, not just the United Kingdom, but the whole world. Crime and does not respect boundaries. So what I hope to do is encourage us to think differently and perhaps more courageously about one of the key barriers that limits our collective ability to counter organized crime. And that is the way we gather, the way we analyze, the way we share and act upon intelligence and investigative insights across the public and private sectors. Quite a few years ago, we had Mr. Jack Straw, who was a Home Secretary, and I often say in my keynote speech that he made a famous statement, and he said, "Fraud and corruption and economic crime is like a deadly virus. Left unchecked, creates huge inequalities and undermines the very foundations of democratic government." It's a very powerful statement by a politician. He was one of the very few politicians that I met and had respect for, because he was absolutely straight. And dare I say it, that there are many politicians that are taking post but are not effective. So I like to think that he actually made a difference. So getting this right is not just a matter of improving efficiency or coordination. It can be a difference between reacting to harm after it occurs and preventing it before it takes root. The ideas I share today stem from my post and actually still ongoing my PhD subject research, which I hope will contribute not only to academic debate, but also in time to practical policy development. I'm in the process at the moment of creating, hopefully, the foundations and platform for a white paper. So, and that's how I would like to take this forward if I can. So let us pause for a moment and truly consider how crime, and more strikingly organized crime, has evolved into a vast profit-driven enterprise. What was once perceived as the work of scattered individuals or local gangs has indeed transformed into a sophisticated global network. They are a business, mirroring legitimate corporations in its structure, their efficiency, and of course strategic planning. Organised crime today operates with corporate precision, complete with hierarchies, logistics, financial management, and even customer relations of sorts. The difference lies only in the legitimacy of their trade. Their business model thrives on exploitation, corruption, and deception. This realization forces us to question not only the adaptability of criminal networks, but also the weaknesses in our system that allow such businesses to flourish in plain sight. So the title of the talk today is a National Crime Coordinating Centre, NCCC. Time to reframe the information sharing narrative. It's almost it's also the central question, and was my central question of my doctoral research. And I want to begin by making one thing clear. This is not an argument for yet another agency, another layer of bureaucracy, or another acronym in all. It's already a crowded policing landscape. It's an argument for rethinking the coordination of crime investigation itself, for moving forward and moving beyond fragmented reaction models, communication towards a unified national framework. The UK must be the only country in the world that has so many police forces. We have 43 national police forces. On top of that, we have another 5 specialist police forces that are dedicated to certain areas of business. Now, they work in silos, and what I'm asking for is a national body to have oversight of all those, to really think and to approach business in a much more targeted manner. So the landscape of crime has shifted dramatically in the past 2 decades. Fraud, cyber-enabled offences, the transnational organised crime now dominate the threat picture. Criminal enterprises operate across boundaries, borders, exploit regulatory gaps, and of course use technology at a pace that traditional policing structures can't match. Yet our response mechanisms remain largely defined by geography, history, and institutional boundaries. The UK still relies heavily on a model designed for the 19th century, one that prioritises local command structures over national intelligence flow. Each force, each agency has regulatory collects data in its own format under its own protocols, and often very limited visibility of what others are holding. So in practice, this fragmentation means they're often investigating parts of the same criminal network without realizing it. The national intelligence model was created, for example, and local intelligence officers would share information on a national basis. And it was formed because if events happened in London, for example, within 24 hours, that information was then outsourced to all other police forces in the UK. So if the offending body moved to Scotland, then perhaps the method of operating would be picked up as something that was being operated in London. So at least we had some joining up there of intelligence. But intelligence sits in silos. Coordination depends on personal relationships rather than structured pathways. And of course, the valuable private sector expertise, especially from accredited investigators and compliance professionals, is frequently excluded from strategic conversation. Now, that was my real focus by incorporating all agencies to make a joint effort to investigate criminal activity. The United States, post 9/11, made a decision that every agency, irrespective of who they were, would work together. So Homeland Security said, look, we have to meet crime and terrorist activity head on. We cannot work separately. We cannot work in silos. What we have to do is to work together. So they came together for the first time. A couple of other countries are doing it, Australia, France, Germany, and there's a couple, and it's working. It is starting to work. So what you're doing is bringing together many skill sets, whether they are warranted police, government departments, or indeed specialized private investigators. So the historical parallels is the cooperation before policing. Interestingly, collaboration between the private sector and those enforcing the law is not a new concept. Before Sir Robert Peel founded the Metropolitan Police in 1829, crime control in Britain was a shared responsibility. So we had merchants, we had insurers, and citizens employed. They were commonly known as thief takers to recover stolen goods, often working alongside parish constables and the magistrates. And we began with the public-private partnership model, and over time, we professionalized it into the policing model we know today. But in doing so, we also institutionalized separation. So the private sector, once a partner in the investigation process, became an external observer. As organised crime evolved into a global enterprise, law enforcement continued to operate within increasingly rigid jurisdictional and cultural boundaries. Business today, corporations today, like to protect, who they are, their reputation. So they are more likely to go to the private sector because they know they can control the private sector by contract rather than report any misdoings going to the police. So we have an imbalance there because they're saying, look, we don't want our reputation damaged, so we want to keep it rigid, and that's happening time and time again. So firstly, the information sharing is hindered not by lack of willingness, but by a lack of structure. So we have officers and private investigators alike reported frustration at the absence of standardized protocols or trusted intermediaries through which intelligence can be exchanged securely and ethically. And of course, secondly, the perception of private investigators remains shaped by outdated stereotypes. And that's a hangover from the tabloids of the 1980s and the 1990s. Yet today's accredited private investigators are often highly skilled professionals with backgrounds in policing, intelligence, and compliance. Their access to commercial data, cyber expertise, and asset tracing capabilities makes them valuable allies in tackling complex multi-jurisdictional crime. And they are being used by the private sector every single day. People who are in business don't want the publicity that there is something wrong with their businesses. They are going private. Third, the regulatory landscape is inconsistent. While some jurisdictions, as I said, such as the US and Australia, have developed formal frameworks for collaboration between the public and the private agency, the UK continues to rely on informal networks and ad hoc agreements. This approach might suffice for low-level fraud, for example, but it's ill-suited to the scale of organised crime we know today. So my case really is what I'm pushing forward is the case for a national crime coordinating centre. And the solution, I think, proposes my research is the creation of the National Crime Coordination Centre, an independent, multi-sectorial body designed to formalise collaboration, harmonise intelligence standards, and provide strategic overview. And at the same time, we can bring in the use of current investigative tools. We can start using AI as an investigative tool, but it needs to be structured. So let me be clear, this is not intended to replace existing agencies. Rather, I see it would function as a hub linking local, regional and national capabilities, enabling information to flow horizontally as well as vertically. So it would actually operate under three principles: integration, not duplication, ensuring that intelligence gathering by the police, regulators and private investigators complements rather than competes. The standardization of practice, establishing national protocols for vetting, data security and information sharing to replace the patchwork of informal arrangements. 3, transparency and accountability, implementing independent oversight mechanisms to maintain ethical standards and public trust. Drawing on international examples, the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, for example, and the US Financial Crimes Enforcement Network demonstrate that such central coordinating structures can enhance both efficiency and trust when supported by clear governance. So imagine, for example, a fraud network identified by a bank's compliance team linked to an ongoing police investigation in another region and flagged by a private investigator tracing assets offshore. Under current structures, that intelligence might take weeks or never to align. Under the national CCC model, those insights could converge within hours, supported by shared protocols and secure communication channels. What I'm saying is the policy is imperative. Why reform cannot wait? Every year, the UK loses tens of billions of pounds to fraud and economic crime. The Home Office figure, for example, for the 2024 figures estimated that over 40% of all reported crime is fraud related, yet only a fraction results in investigation or prosecution. We're chasing the tail. We cannot get ahead of the curve, and we have to try and do that. Meanwhile, frontline officers are under unprecedented pressure. I was. Regional forces face resourcing disparities, and the public trust in policing, already fragile after several high-profile scandals, depends increasingly on visible competence in tackling serious and organised crime. We cannot rebuild that trust through rhetoric alone. Structural reform is required. The police as we know it, police by consent. That's the way the police do. The police have lost public confidence. As I've said, there have been so many instances where things have gone wrong. So one of the things I'd like to say is the overcoming the cultural and regulatory barriers. Of course, reform will not be easy. Institutional culture is powerful. Police officers are rightly cautious about information sharing. Private investigators are often wary of being seen as interlopers, and policymakers must balance security with privacy. But as my research found, trust grows from clarity. When roles, standards, and accountability mechanisms are defined, cooperation flourishes. The NCCC's success would depend on establishing a shared professional code of conduct, one that recognises the ethical parity of all accredited partners and ensures rigorous oversight of data use. This is not about diluting police powers. It's about augmenting investigative capacity through legitimate collaboration. So a vision for the future. If established, a National Crime Coordination Centre could deliver tangible benefits within 5 years. A national intelligence repository enabling pattern analysis across crime types and jurisdictions. Unified investigative standards, ensuring that whether a fraud is investigated in London or Leeds, it meets the same evidential and ethical benchmarks. Streamlined rapid response mechanisms, which allowing coordinating multi-agency operations against emerging threats. And finally, and so importantly, restored public confidence as citizens see visual cooperation rather than fragmentation. So the NCC would not only act as a coordination hub, but as a symbol of collective resolve, a statement that the UK is prepared to modernise its crime-fighting architecture for the digital age. A call to reframe the narrative, that's what I like. So has the time come to reframe the information sharing narrative? I believe it has. For too long, we have accepted fragmentation as inevitable. an unfortunate byproduct of autonomy, jurisdiction, and institutional history. But the reality is that criminals are more networked, more agile, and more collaborative than we are. If we continue to rely on outdated structures, we risk fighting 21st century crime with 19th century tools. The NCC proposal is not the whole answer, but it represents a step towards strategic coherence, towards a policing system that reflects how crime actually operates rather than how our how our institutions prefer to imagine it. So in conclusion, I'm saying it's from research to reform. In closing, I return to the core principle of my research, that effective crime prevention is a shared national responsibility. The police cannot do it alone, nor can private industry, regulators, or academia. Reframing the information sharing narrative is ultimately about reframing our collective identity, seeing ourselves not as separate sectors with different priorities, but as interdepartmental actors within the same ecosystem of public protection. Excuse me. So a National Crime Coordination Centre would provide the structure to make that vision real, to align intelligence, to professionalise collaboration, and to rebuild the social contract between law enforcement and the communities we serve. As practitioners and scholars, we have both the evidence and the ethical duty to advocate for this change. The question is no longer whether we can afford to reform, but whether we can afford not to. Thank you very much indeed. So that's my, I actually wrote, dare I say it, my paper ended up 143,000 words. So that's just a very small portion of my research. So thank you very much indeed for listening. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, David.
I think one of the major issues that we have to now start to be looking at is, and it's an area which I'm going to start writing a research in, is the use of artificial intelligence in the coming years to investigate organised crime, because the criminals are using, high-tech equipment. So why shouldn't we use high-tech equipment to investigate the crime? So that's my next level of research. Thank you very much.
Very well delivered.
Thank you, sir.
May I have a question?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay, what is the main reason why those standards in the UK are so fragmented?
The reason why it's fragmented is, dare I say it, when I was actually in the police service and in the fraud squad, a lot of it was bureaucracy. The structure of the police service in my day was structured in a way that people did not want to lose control over their particular areas of policing. We had chief constables, and then we moved on to chief executive officers, and they become then sort of business people rather than having a history or in policing. So it's evolved, but bureaucracy is one of the major barriers why the UK the policing system has not advanced. We're doing our best. We now have crime commissioners in the areas around the UK, and again, what we've done is we've just put in another layer of bureaucracy. I don't believe in crime commissioners. I believe that people should be in positions who have a history of they themselves being police officers, understanding what's going on the streets of the UK. They have a better understanding. They don't have to use their imagination because they've experienced it themselves. So I'm a great believer. I'm a great believer in those people who should be running our police services should be practitioners themselves. There's been many sort of recommendations that there should be for example, one national fraud squad. And that was something that was suggested some 15, 20 years ago. We don't have that. We just have fragmented units trying to do their best. And at times they might be talking to each other, but they work in silos. And if you work in silos, you're doubling up on work, and you're not speaking to each other. So we need a coordinating oversight governing body that everybody is linked to, that is has the opportunity to govern the way we investigate organised crime. And I think this is the way to go. It can only be the way to go because we're so fragmented. There has to be a harmonisation of all agencies, irrespective of whether they're warranted or private, to investigate organised crime, because they do not respect barriers. We're not just talking about national, we're talking about transnational crime as well. So you can see the very large problem we have. But yeah, right at the heart of a lot of the issues that we've experienced is bureaucracy and people unwilling to change and putting the effort in to make sure that change takes place. Thank you.
Thank you.
So could I ask a question?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
please.
Yes. So what do you think it will take? Is it someone strong in the heart of government? You mentioned Jack Straw before, who was behind reform and change. Is that what it will take? It won't happen from within?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. We're at a point now where organised crime is really, dare I say it, running the country. The government often say, yes, we've made inroads into organised crime, but in a lot of cases we've driven it underground, which is so, dare I say, if you go on the dark web and you're an investigator, you find there is so much going on. You are absolutely right. There needs to be a strong government, and there needs to be personalities within the government who truly believe there has to be a severe change in policing in the UK. The policing as we know it has been around for 200 years, and we have to build a robust response to organised crime, because the person on the street is not safe anymore. Even your identity on your computer is not safe anymore. We don't see broken windows or muddy footprints on the carpet anymore. Someone is attacking your bank account who's sat on the beach in Acapulco. So it has become so severe now that there has to be real focus on reform of the policing and the way we investigate crime in the UK, for our own self-survival. But you're absolutely right in answering the question, what is the answer? Well, the answer is that the government has to accept that change has to come, and it's now critical. We're at a crossroads where if we don't take the right fork, then we're in trouble for the future. Because the reason I'm saying is because crime now has gone technology, and we're just not equipped. We don't have the professionals, we don't have the expertise, we're not supporting the investigators with their money, and that's where we are these days. So yeah. So it's sad news.
Thank you, Doctor. Oh, sorry. Dr. Sumro would like to ask David.
Yes, please.
Dr. David, it was really a comprehensive speech on the topic, and it was very informative and research-based. My name is Dr. Sumro. Presently, I'm in Pakistan at the moment, and I've also served as a Home Secretary and a magistrate also. So my question is that what could be the linkage of the intelligence information for prevention of the crime, which has been used since centuries? But do you think that we have failed in intelligence collection for prevention of the crime? And the another point is the conviction ratio in the courts, because I have seen in UK the process is very slow, and you just issue the notices, and it takes years and years for the production of the convicts in the court, and the courts are very. I won't attempt a contempt of court, but I would say courts are very lazy in conviction. So how do you link both the things, the intelligence and the conviction? Thank you.
Yeah, one of the major issues that we thought we got it right with the national intelligence model and the establishment of intelligence officers within every police force in the UK. So they, on an instant basis, they talk to each other. And one of the real problems that we have is that the intelligence that we gather, the quality of that intelligence, how do we take that into the courtroom? One of the problems we also have is that we have courts that are closing. They are, we've got the crime in the UK is so high now. We have so many perpetrators. We cannot fit them into the system. We've got people who want to be justice of the peace, and they're so overworked they're leaving. So the judicial system is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And that, of course, contributes to the time issue. By the time a crime gets into the court system, it could be 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years. And no jury wants to be bothered with evidence that is maybe 3 or 4 years old. And that's really one of the major issues we have, is that the availability of courts, the availability of court time, the availability of the judicial system representatives to actually hear and contribute towards, running the court system. We are in a mess, I'll be quite honest with you. A lot of the cases that I dealt with were obviously financial. It was not unusual for the case to run for 2 to 3 years. And by the time we got it into a courtroom, nobody wanted to know because it wasn't in the public interest. I'm not sure if you've got any brilliant ideas of how we can streamline our system, but I think, we have to seriously now look at reform. We have to try and make sure that the intelligence that we gather is handled very quickly, so it goes into the court system and the perpetrators are brought between the system and dealt with. And of course that leads on then to the prison service, that we've got we're so small, we don't have the capacity now. We're at breaking point when it comes to the number of prisoners we have in our prisons. We don't have the facilities anymore. So honestly, I don't know the answer with regard to how we can make it a success, but something has to be done. We are at breaking point, and it will only get worse.